We might just give a few more minutes, everybody. Slowly, slowly.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Vijay, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be.
How has your first 2 weeks been?
First 3 weeks. Pretty
3
good.
weeks. I'm sorry. I lost a week somewhere in there.
No, pretty good. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be back in the industry.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. I was away for 3 years, I think. 2 years. Yeah. Can you guys see me?
No.
Okay. I need to fix that. How about? Oh, there I am.
Yeah, we can. Now we can.
Wonderful. Okay.
Now we have the presenting team, so we might shortly make a start. Might give it a couple more minutes though.
Okay. Can you
Hi,
hear
Alex.
me?
Yes, we
Hi,
can, Alex.
Manuel. God.
We might just get you to put yourself on mute for us.
Okay, no probs.
And we'll make a start in a couple of minutes. We might make a start and let everybody else in as we move forward.
Hi, Secretary.
Hi, Ross. How are you?
Yeah,
Welcome.
good, thank you. So I was just making sure I was on. Hi, John. Hi,
Yeah.
Hamish, and others.
Okay, so thank you for joining us on today's online presentation. So we have, as you know, this is the ones where we've been asking some special guests to do presentations, and I'm really thankful for GMCT, for Brenton, Hamish and Julian who are joining us today. and Brenton will run through and share what we need to know with his team for us as well. So if you've got any comments, raise your hand or pop it in the chat and we'll come back to those questions towards the end. Is everybody happy with that format today? And we are recording it so you can watch it over and over as we move forward in the next few months. And it'll be on the new website that we've launched this week. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at that one, please reset your password to get in. So over to you, Brenton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll keep my part short and sweet. I'm Brenton Gresby. I'm the General Manager of Sustainable Development with Greater Metropolitan Cemeteries Trust. And I have the honour and privilege to work with a great bunch of individuals, two of which are Hamish Coates, our Principal Designer, and Julian, who is the Manager of all things delivery in terms of construction. So I'll stick around and answer any questions at the end, but really this presentation is really coming from Hamish and Julian. So I'll flick the slides, but I'll pass to Hamish. Well, I might go to Julian first to introduce himself and then go to Hamish, who will start the presentation.
Hey everyone, yeah, as Brenton said, I'm Julian, the Capital Delivery Manager at GMCT. So I work with a team of 7 project managers and yeah, manage the construction portfolio across our 19 active sites. Pass over to Hamish.
Thanks, Julian. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting us along to this morning. I'm quite happy to just tell everybody what we do and how we go about doing it. My name's Hamish Coates. I'm the Principal Designer at GMCT, and what that means is I'm a qualified landscape architect, and I lead a small team of other designers, landscape architects and architects, to design and build, or hand over to Julian to build, the all our cemetery spaces, and that ranges in scale from small grave inventory developments right up to large multi-million-dollar land developments, effectively. So we do a mix of in-house designing as well as outsourcing and managing external design consultants, simply because we just don't have the capacity in-house to manage those really big projects. But nonetheless, I'm here today just to tell you a little bit about how we go about doing that, and explaining to you and asking any questions and sort of trying to just debunk and demythologize any of the processes. I guess in simple terms, if you've ever phoned up a contractor yourself to come around and maybe fix the house or install a kitchen or do the backyard or something like that, the process is pretty much the same. It's first of all, it's just about knowing what you want, whether or not it meets your budget, and you want to know how long is it going to take to build, because really your eyes are on the result and the outcome. And so that's what we do, but we just do it in a more a bigger scale with a specific product in mind or a specific outcome in mind, which is building a cemetery. And that invariably involves digging up the land, and of course you never know what's going to happen until you start doing that, and so it can quickly escalate into complexities and issues and all sorts of wonderful little problems to solve. So look, I'll just get am I controlling the slides, or is somebody else doing that? Sorry?
I believe I am.
Okay, next one. So this first slide, I think you'll all agree that this is pretty much a state of mind, this squiggle. This is what represents the brain, I think, and the thinking about how the design process works. So initially, and if you look at the left side of the diagram, it's this scrambled mess of like, oh, I know what I don't like, but I know what I want. And so after you work through it, you have an outcome. If I could go to the next slide, please. And so what this really means is that the first bit is about understanding your site and knowing what it is and sort of discovering what you can and can't do, and researching how you might go about doing that. As you move through the discovery phase, it becomes clearer because your research and concept really start to tell you what you can and can't do. And so it evolves into this design process about actually putting pen to paper and working out the logistics and the machinations behind creating this development. Next, please. So before we can actually start designing, there's a few little things to think about, and these are all in no particular order, but they just are prompts really to help you understand what kind of project that you're trying to deal with. Is it a large project? Is it a medium one, or is it a small one? This will determine a lot about the future engagements you might need to do, the types of things you need to think about, and the budgets and obviously the time limit about how that might unfold. If you like GMCT, then you'll have a procurement policy to deal with, because it's an obligation for us, a statutory obligation, and this is all just about good governance and how we sort of control the machinations of the project. Obviously, we're not just doing this in isolation. We're serving a community, and we have responsibilities towards that, plus the organisation as a whole. So we want to make sure that we are ticking all the boxes in the right way, and being accountable and responsible for the outcomes of spending the public's money. So we sort of, governance is a really big thing about how we might do this. So we set that up with a project working group, which is pretty much an internal group that really deals with the nitty-gritty and the nuts and bolts of the project. And then we also elevate any issues and decision makings to a project control group, which can help us move from one phase to the next, making sure that everyone's on the same page. We also have a consultant team. Now, depending on whether it's a large, medium or small project, we might be able to do that in a simple way, in-house with a handful of people, and engage external expertise ourselves. Or we might think that we'll throw the whole lot out to market and get a principal design consultant who can organise a multidisciplinary team to develop the design. And that might mean, generally speaking, a landscape architect, possibly an architect, definitely a civil engineer, and possibly a structural engineer. That would be the holy trinity in that respect of what a project team consists of. But again, according to the size and scale, we might get in other specialist sub-consultants as well to advise us, and I'll get into that next. But we also need to organise the project around a project management framework, and this is in order to expedite the project in the simplest kind of way. This is where Julian and his team really come to the fore, because we like to get the project managers on board in the design process as early as we possibly can, in order for them to really understand what it is we're trying to do. And so when we hand it over to Julian's team, they've got a pretty good idea about what's involved in terms of managing and organising its construction.
So, Hamish, we've got a question from Vijay. Sorry,
Okay.
mate.
Good morning, Hamish. This is wonderful, particularly the preliminary slide. My question, I guess, is, apart from depleting stock that the community wants and sells, how do you determine what to exactly build when it comes to, say, the multicultural customers, and how do you know that there's a demand for it before you go ahead and build it? Because I can imagine, this is a very expensive. These projects are very expensive, small, medium, or large. How do you determine demand before you go ahead and build it? Because I'm guessing that would make part of the business case, right?
That's right. Great question, Vijay. And this is all part of the design process as well. So what we've been trying to do more recently at GMCT is develop what we call a design brief. And the design brief tells you what we need to do, what kind of grave type and product that we need to build, how it's going to be built, where it's going to be built, and and our job as designers to work out what you actually can have and what you can't have. But our cultural directions, I suppose, is determined by our strategic planner and others, based on what we think is selling well, what we're running out of, what grave type we're running out of, and what we think we might need to build for the future, as well as trying to push on certain areas, new and innovative practices, new products, that may be less carbon intensive, or perhaps trying to test out a new market, or just simply in the world of the Islamic community, just demand, because they are the way they purchase and bury their loved ones is a very strict and very intensive kind of product. So it's a mix of a lot of different things, but general gut feelings, a lot of data. That's what we're trying to really base our future projections on, is what does the data tell us, where are the trends moving, and whether or not the patch of land that we've set aside can actually is suitable for that type of grave product. So we tend to just spiral in. The design process does take a long time, and it's not unusual for getting halfway through that and having to go back and change the product type because it's emerged that we're short on in some areas, and so we'll pivot over towards that. But look, if I could just respectfully ask if we can keep the questions to the end, and then we can have a bit of more of a round table. But thanks for that, Vijay. Just to continue with the preliminaries, if you go to the next slide, Brenton, please. Because we're dealing with large, generally speaking, large tracts of land, generally Crown land, but not always. There's a number of, and while we are sort of stewards of that land, we still have an obligation to find out what's actually how that land is defined, what kind of overlays, what kind of restrictions, what kind of statutory obligations, and what kind of other stakeholders are involved in that. So this is really important work to do prior to beginning any kind of design, because depending on what the other stakeholders tell you will determine to what extent you can develop that land, if in some cases at all. So there might be such heavy restrictions that it will be a big challenge to try and build a cemetery on that site. But Melbourne Water are a big stakeholder that we have to deal with. There's Heritage Victoria as well. If the tract of land that we're developing isn't Crown land, we'll have to go to planning with local councils and find out what we can do. We'll have to apply for planning permits in that case. Crown land is exempt from planning permits. We might deal with not just Melbourne Water, but local water authorities. And I've just put Greater Western End Water in there as an example. Power authorities that control the services and utilities, and of course our cultural and Indigenous considerations as well, which is becoming a more significant and important aspect to consider. An example of that might be a tract of land we're developing at Altona East at the moment, and one of its borders is the Cororoit Creek, which is widely recognised as one of the most important Indigenous sites in Melbourne. So we've got to work very closely with the cultural representatives down there. But it's not easy, and there's a lot of conversations before we can even set up and start designing, because these kinds of conversations help us determine the design brief so we can either understand what we're doing ourselves or inform an external consultant for them to base their design on. Go to the next slide, please, Brenton. So I'm going to use a case study, an example of one of our sites. It's a medium type size site in an already existing cemetery, which is our Northern Memorial Park, and it's a section called, excuse me, Snowgum B. And the reason why I'm exemplifying this project is because I think it is quite a strong project that doesn't always include all the things I've just talked about, but we're trying to work out how we can become more sustainable in the development of our cemeteries. So apart from just addressing all the authority and permits and approvals and stakeholders, it's working out what we can do as responsible land stewards within that context and within that framework, and how we can push the boundaries to both satisfy the responsibilities we have to the land, how we're going to produce a viable product for our community at large, and also a little bit of self-satisfaction about doing the best we possibly can addressing sustainability and climate change issues. So it's quite a complex and mixed bag, but we think we've kind of got a really good outcome on Snowgum B. So when we look at a place like this, the next idea is we ask this question about feasibility, and quite simply, is it feasible to build this particular area as a cemetery and with a particular type of product? So we undertake a lot of due diligence exercises which will help us answer those questions. So, for example, first of all, we need a feature survey. We need to know which way the land's forming, which way the water's flowing. What are the heritage and cultural heritage management opportunities and constraints within that site? We like to know what the ecological and biodiversity challenges are and the current situation there. When we do design the roads and pathways, how is the traffic going to work from a safety and logical point of view? We'll get an arborist in there to understand what the mature trees are, what the vegetation in general is. The hydrology, a very important part, as I mentioned before. How does the water flow? Water is a very big sustainability driver, because water management, as you know, it's got its own way of doing things, and we like to try and either work with that or control it in the best possible way. Of course, we'll need a civil engineer and a structural engineer to sort of, first of all, work out the logistics of the construction, and also to make sure that the grave infrastructure itself is suitable for that type of land. And of course, that's based on geotechnical information. So we don't know what's going on below the ground, and we would want to try and minimise the surprises once we start digging. Sometimes, particularly in the west of Melbourne, the rock is quite shallow, sitting below the ground. So it's really important for us to know, how far that is. Can we, in fact, bury a body in the ground, or do we have to approach it from another way? We'd like to know what its environmental assessment is overall, the services engineering, the electricity, gas, sewerage, and any other specialist inputs as required. It's important to think that no two sites of land are the same. They're all uniquely have their own unique characteristics and are different. So each project is brand new, although we can apply the same kinds of approach to working out its feasibility. Next slide, please, Brenton. So in order to do this, we on this particular project, we modelled the site. And so this is just a computer model, and I won't get too technical about this because quite simply I don't know how to. My former colleague did this for us, and it was a really good model. So we set up the site 3D. So we've got some contours going from the top of the page north down to south. Those sort of arcing circles, black outlines you can see there, they represent the trees and the tree protection zones. The area is called River Red Gum. It's got pre-settlement mature river red gum trees, so it's really important that we try and preserve those as best we can, and then work out how we can work around all these kind of not negotiables in our case, to do that. So we wanted to study the land. And Brendan, I'm not sure if you've got an ability to click a little play button at the bottom of that slide. There you go. And this, if you can drag the slider through, it goes a bit quick. There's a bit of soundtrack which I couldn't get working on this, but I'll try and explain it to you. This just describes the parameters of the site. And as I mentioned before, the tree protection zones, there's the north at the top of the page, and the water generally flows from top to the bottom of the page. And why we do this, because a characteristic of climate change is that we're having fewer rain events, but when they do happen, they're happening in a more intensive manner. So we've got to think about, if we're going to build all this infrastructure, how are we going to make it work from a drainage point of view? And you can just see all the little arrows going across the site. That gives us an indication of what's going on there at the moment. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is the lay of the land, and this is how we're starting. This is another kind of a more detailed study that shows you, if you can hit, there's a play button there too, Brenton, if you could hit that. Thank you. And this just shows in more detail some of the current landform. And so why we're doing this is because this is going to inform a lot of decision making, which is generally to do with expense. We've got several options about how we can approach sustainable design, and that is, if you drag that slider across, it'll speed it up a bit too. There you go. And you can see sort of now where the water is, and it indicates to us that it's coming from the left side of the page into the centre of the site, and then it's also flowing over to the right-hand side. But there's a low spot going down the centre of the site. So this is giving us an indication of what's happening on the site. So what kind of engineering now do we need to apply to this site in both an efficient manner, but in a cost-effective way as well? So this is really, really good information. It's a little bit pointy-headed, but at the same time, it's something that really is informing our future decisions. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. So, so knowing all this and the feasibility and the water authorities, we've come up with 3 different options about how we might approach. So these are really high-level conceptual approaches. We've got the first solution, which is to structure the design around a natural swale system. We've got a second option about filling in the natural depression and creating more opportunities for grave space. And so, as we know, land's at a premium, so our obligations is to try and maximise the number of burial opportunities, maximise the yield on site. And our third option is to do that with what we call grey infrastructure, and that is in the usual and the way that we've always done it, which is with pipes and pits, curbs and channels. But there are pros and cons and pluses and minuses behind all those opportunities. So from a construction cost point of view, the natural swale system is the cheaper. From a number of graves opportunity, though, we know that solution has the lowest yield. However, from a cost-effective point of view, the traditional approach of using pipes and pits, curbs and channel produces a greater yield, but really, in the scheme of things, it's only 75 more graves that we can work out. So we have to weigh up, is it better to be cheaper with fewer opportunities? So it's a sliding scale, and it's just an assessment really of what the most optimal way of doing things is. So you can see that the drainage requirements, it's minimal. We've got an overland swale system that requires lower maintenance, whereas the other two options have a higher maintenance over the life of the cemetery as well. From other sustainable points of view, the placemaking opportunities. This is a really important part of design. It's because not only are we just dealing with building a cemetery, but what does it feel like to actually be there? And how are we going to make that a really pleasant experience for our customers? So placemaking, being in a place that you like to be in, that's a really important part. But how are we going to manage and juggle all this? And so it turns out that option one here, this natural overland swale sim, was the most feasible option. Even though it had the lowest yield, it was relatively negligible compared to the costs and complexity of employing the other two options. So if we go to the next slide, please. So we've taken option one. We've taken that through the governance process, argued why we believe this is the best option and had that approved, so we can move on to a more detailed conceptual analysis about how we want to develop an area specifically with garden headstone products. So why we chose, and this might help answer your question again, Vijay, why did we choose garden headstone? We know it's a really good product for us. It sells really well. In River Red Gum, there weren't any real opportunities that existed at the moment. This particular site was in the middle. It was sandwiched on either side by grave infrastructure, which is monumental graves. So they're a very less green, I think, grave type. And we thought from a placemaking point of view and the site overall, it would be good to alleviate and relieve the site of this very pretty harsh kind of environment that monumental graves kind of promote. And we thought we'd put a more greener, sort of more landscapey option in between. So it's based on product. The decision was based on what kind of product we wanted to use and how that might work best in the context of the existing site. The area has also got 6 river red gum trees in it, which are pretty big and mature ones. So from a logistical point of view and construction point of view, the building a garden headstone was going to be a much easier proposition than pouring concrete and common foundations in an area like this. So this is how we're trying to work up the concept to the next level to actually understand the exact number of graves that we can get out of it, where we might put in the natural swale, which we're going around the tree protection zones because we feel that what we're trying to do is slow down the water. We didn't want to drain it away really quickly, that grey infrastructure would, the pits and pipes. We thought if we can slow the flow of water, we can hold water on site. It can then, in turn, help irrigate the site, particularly the old trees that are there as well. So why we've done it in these stripes and lines is not just because of the efficiency, but those lime green areas you see on the site are in fact garden beds in a swale. So that those swales help direct any water that flows into the main central channel, which is that squiggly grey line down there. So we're trying to capture the water and direct it into the centre of the site, in which case it'll flow from top to bottom and hook into the existing overland swale system that characterises the entire River Red Gum area. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is what it looks like in in section and give you some idea of scale. So on the section 2 through the main swale, that's the grey squiggly area. That's the main swale that carries the water. And on the right side, section 1, you can see there's some concrete beams between a garden bed, a low garden bed with the swale in it. So where you can see that fellow on the right side standing, that's where the grave is located, and the headstone fits on top of that concrete beam. So if you go to the next slide, please. So with this design approach in mind, we ran it. If you can hit the play button again, thanks. We ran it back through this model to see what happens with it, and you can kind of see the same thing is happening now, but in a more controlled way through the garden bed swales and into the main swale. But it still follows the same logic and the same feel as the site as it functions undeveloped. So it means we're just using the natural lay of the land to help us make a more efficient drainage outcome that also can help irrigate the landscape and provide a more low maintenance development. So this kind of computer modelling is really beneficial for us, and we don't always do it, but it's in this particular case we felt like we had some really good opportunities to test this out. So the result is it's all good. We think this is going to work, and we've tested it as much as we can. It's a concept that conforms to the parameters of the stakeholders, the client brief, the feasibility, due diligence exercises. So we feel like there shouldn't be any real surprises. So that's so we decided to pursue this particular project. So after the concept stage, if you go to the next slide, please, Brendan, we go into this thing called design development. So we've got the concept. Everyone's really happy with the approach, which defines the concept and the general arrangement. Now we have to get into working out the details, the nitty-gritty of the design. So if we're going to design a swale that directs water into a main swale, you know, how big does it need to be? How long does it need to be? What kind of plants need to be helping us do that? What kind of public amenity do we need to include? Where are the egress and ingress points? How are people going to get around the site, the access, the movement? Do we need bridges? If so, how many of them? What kind? They need to be engineered and constructed. So we have to design all these little aspects right down to pretty much the nuts and bolts on all elements that we want to have in our cemetery. Fortunately, we have a number of design standards that we can fall back onto. They generally represent the different types of grave infrastructure, and so we've had those engineered and approved, and so we just pick and choose what kind of design standard we need for what kind of application. So in this case, it's a garden headstone, and we have an engineered smaller concrete beam that the headstones can sit on, and we'll work with that as a standard. On top of that, we've got to think about all the other tiny little aspects. How does the grass meet the gravel, for example? What kind of edging, the thickness of the pathways, the width of the pathways. Does it provide enough opportunity for our burial operations gang to manoeuvre their vehicles in? Have they got enough space for the bucket to lean over and dig up the ground when they inter a body? So there's a lot of negotiation at this particular point. There's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of conversation, and a lot of collaboration and consultation, a lot of C words in there. And So this is something that goes pretty much round and round and round and round till we think we've got it right, and that as many people as we're trying to satisfy as many people's expectations. Because when we hand this over, it's going to work in a very practical and functional way. So despite the aesthetics and the design and the beauty of the whole thing, we've also got to make sure that it works. And it works not just for our maintenance and operations guys, but also for the visitation. When you come onto site and you're experiencing this very profound moment in your life, how does that make you feel? And so this is the fantastic part of the job. And so very challenging, but we rely on a lot of design standards that can help us achieve this level of complexity. So if you go to the next slide, please. And so once that's achieved, so at the design development phase, just prior to this phase, we'll put it back through the costing and find out if it's achievable from a budgeting point of view. It has to go through our finance department, and they put a fine-tooth comb over that one to make sure that whatever we're proposing is in fact giving us a return on investment that works out our net present value as a positive outcome to make the project viable from a financial point of view. That's a really, really important part of any of our projects progressing. So it's not uncommon for us to go back and redesign some aspects and value manage the outcome because it's just simply too expensive or too large or doesn't have enough grave infrastructure that we can justify the current design. But once we all keep finance happy, we can then move on to the next part, which is the green light to actually prepare the documentation and take it to tender. And so we take the design development drawings and we package them up into a set of tender drawings. And so these are really highly detailed drawings that explain absolutely everything about how you build that particular project. It's a number of drawings and a technical specification that goes down to the strength of the concrete, the type of acidity in the soil that we expect, all the different kinds of plants, the specification of the bench, the drinking fountains, the rubbish bins, the bridge, just everything. So the contractor then shouldn't be any real surprises with the contractor, and they can give us the most accurate price they possibly can. And we'll compare that with an independent costing from a quantity surveyor, and we'll generally go from there. So and so that's where Julian's really going to take over. But I've got a couple more slides before he jumps in and preempt his work. And so once it's constructed, these are some early shots just during construction. So you can see some of the garden beds defined by the mulch. You can see the concrete swales that angle into this main swale, and you can see that during construction it's already rained and some of this water is still being held on site, which means it doesn't look like much at the moment, but it means that functionally it's working and that we're on the money with this one. And if you go to the next one, this is about 12 months later, and you can see the landscape starting to grow and knit together. And the two pictures on the left, they're the big trees that we want to preserve, and that'll help define the character of not only River Red Gum Parklands, but the Snow Gum Bee as well. And so the importance of the vegetation helps promote the biodiversity, and create really what we want is a living landscape. So when people come there, they're not just surrounded by death, but reassured by the fact that life goes on. and defined by the type of environment that they're sitting in. And here's just a few more pictures of the constructed outcome. So you can see the lawn areas where the interments take place, and the headstone beams and the garden beds and shelters. So I think that's it for me. I hope that's given you some indication of the types of things we think about. It's a pretty complex operation, but highly rewarding, particularly when you can see a built outcome. So thank you very much. I'll pass on to Julian now, who can explain how he takes my dreams and turns them into reality.
Thanks, Hamish. So I'll step through the general process we follow for project delivery at GMCT and try and add some learnings that we've discovered in the past. So just feel free to jump in at any stage to ask questions, or if you'd like further elaboration on any point. So after we get the detailed design documentation from Hamish's team, we go to procurement. So at GMCT, our process is projects larger than $150,000. We complete a formal tender process to find the right contractor for the job. This involves completing documentation, which includes conditions, drawing and spec, draft contract, a response form, and pricing schedule. So all of those assist in consistency of responses. So it helps us sort of compare apples with apples as opposed to comparing apples with oranges. We then complete a confidential evaluation process, and we end up with the most suitable contractor for the project. So that's for the bigger projects. For smaller projects, we run a much shorter process, typically receive sort of 2 or 3 quotes, and we assess them and confirm that the scope is correct. And the main point is normally to check the exclusions or departures to ensure that the expected work is going to be quoted accordingly. Throughout the procurement process, whether it's large or small, it's normally the best time to identify any requirements or expectations, and that includes safety. So requesting things like SWIMs and JSAs that are required for the job, informed conditions such as tools down for nearby funerals, and call for identification of subcontractors, so you know which work is being completed in-house and which work is being outsourced. So that's sort of the best time during the procurement process to call out all the things that are required, as opposed to awarding the contract and then trying to call those things out afterwards. We usually request a schedule of rates as well for any associated works, so that helps reduce the risk of being overcharged for variations and additional work requests. The procurement stage is also the best time to outline any provisions, so that includes provisional extensions of time and provisional allowances. So provisional extensions of time really help you specify the amount of delays that can't trigger a monetary claim, and provisional allowances can help you sort of budget for your known unknowns, and that also gives the contractor an understanding and expectation. So an example of a provisional allowance that we use pretty often is the excavation of rock removal. So not knowing sort of what we're going to uncover, but we are sometimes through surveys and other things are aware that there is some sort of rock included. So once procurement's done, we head to construction. Once construction commences, it's important to manage the contractor, obviously. So this includes safety checks, progress, and performance. We always try and engage the designers, whether it's landscape architects, building architects, any type of engineer or something else, to complete hold point inspections. So an example of one of the more common ones we do is a pre-pour inspections for concrete. So whether it's pathways, beams, foundations, anything like that, having pre-pour inspections is really important. If inspections can't occur for whatever reason, something that we use on some of our smaller jobs is to always ensure the contractor or the project manager takes a heap of photos at each of the hold points or throughout the whole project, and that just assists with any resolutions if problems do arise. There's also normally hold points as well for things like, for permit related things like Heritage Victoria and trees or Melbourne water and things like that. If variations do arise or extra scope is being added, we typically follow the process of justification. So includes a visit to site or photos just to sort of prove that it's legitimate. Then we request a proper review, so a proper quote and time implications from the contractor, and then we assess that. So assess the quote. Is it fair and reasonable? And that's where your schedule of rates comes in from your procurement process. Does it align with your schedule of rates? Another aspect of delivery is hiring a superintendent or a project manager. So on some of our larger projects, we hire superintendents and we have our internal project managers, and that can add some value. So either of those two roles can offer regular reporting, management of site meetings, liaising with contractors, inspection, supervision, and contract administration. But superintendents specifically can offer independent viewpoints and advice. So that really assists with your contractor relation and following things like Australian standards. After completing a practical completion, we always complete a practical completion walk. Before awarding PC though, it's important to formalise our defects. So we normally do that in a detailed list, and that's important because without formalising that list, the contractor is not obliged to rectify any of their faults. Examples include concrete cracking, layout issues, unspecified items, incorrect materials, such as galvanised steel used instead of stainless steel, are some of the things that we sometimes see during defects. We also sometimes include a period of landscaping establishment and maintenance. So we've had on projects 6, 12, 18 or 24 months of watering and nurturing plants within the project area. The reason we have done this is that younger plants are provided with a better chance of thriving, and it's typical for plants to fail when planted by civil contractors, which some of us have seen before, given it's just not their forte. And then after PC is awarded, we normally have a 12-month defect liability period built into the contract, and that's vital just to ensure that contractors are accountable for issues which arise after handover. And then once that's all done, we complete our internal handover with our sales, operations and maintenance teams, and that really just smooths the process for the management of these new areas. And that's all for my presentation. If anyone has any questions, yell out.
Yeah.
Nothing. Brenton, Hamish, anything to add?
And it's a long process, generally speaking, and people think that well, particularly designs are, just about drawing rectangles on a bit of paper, but it's so much more than that. And I hope I've demonstrated that why that is, and also it's a key relationship for us designers to work with Julian's team in order to not only just make sure that the design is tracking according to the tender documentations, but invariably there are so many issues that happen. The drawings and the design that the contractors follow is about 80-90% theoretical, and there's a giant sort of a significant part of that has to be modified as the building process unfolds. So it might be that we discover something we didn't know about, or something needs to be changed, or in this more recently, because of the global conditions, the supply of materials is not always as we thought was available when we specified it maybe 12 months earlier on a project. And certainly, the costs are escalating in an uncontrollable way. So you know, there are other issues where the residents might sort of be a little bit upset about what's going on. For example, you know, we try and prime them as best we can prior to it, but of course they're not involved in this world, so they don't exactly know what's going to happen until it happens. And so, you know, we kind of grab our comms team and say, quick, sort it out. So they're pretty good at doing that sort of thing. And but there are lots of little issues and nuances that I have to deal with. So during the construction process, it's a constant conversation, weekly site meetings or bi-weekly site meetings with contractors, just to iron out any issues and problems. You know, it always rains, so it's always muddy. There's downtime and all sorts of things going on.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. One is, how do you manage the subsiding of beams, or is that all in the good design?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. The answer is yes. It is in a good design, but we definitely do have to manage subsidence of beams around our parks quite often from older areas, and it's not really a one solution fits all. It's every situation is totally different depending on the beam, depending on what the actual issue is and why it is subsiding. Once we do investigations, we find that a lot of the time there's no piers that have been built because, you know, it's was built 40 plus years ago. Sometimes there are piers, but they haven't gone down far enough to natural clay or whatever it is. So yeah, it's not a single answer, but yeah, sometimes we have installed piers where there haven't been, or installed extra piers before. And yeah, Brenton, I don't know if you've got any other examples of subsided beams.
Really, a lot of the time when we find those issues in older areas, it's also the consideration of we go in and we dig the hole and then we fill it in. It's not as compacted, so the water does settle in it, and the whole area starts to kind of settle down. So we find that in you know, where the roads and the drainage infrastructure has originally been put in place, it's actually sitting higher than those areas now. So it kind of does pull, and that water does continue to make that whole area settle, in which the beams kind of subside with it. We have in a few areas as a simple solution, quote unquote, is to actually lower the roads and try and move water away. So it doesn't stop the subsidence that has happened, but it hopefully slows it down a little bit in the future, because it is a big task to, you know, it's every family member with whatever the memorial is, there has to be an agreement to do something to actually repair it, which is costly anyway. So that's the kind of a half measure that we can attempt first.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. So as a guide, how far out do you commence your planning?
Wow, that's a great question. Because there's overall, it's a very general kind of planning that we do. So we're always looking through some modelling and supply and demand modelling that it's becoming more and more advanced for us. And that's really looking kind of that anything from 30 years out is our land policy for, you know, what we should be trying to secure new land. To 15, we should have a general plan of what the infrastructure is. But for those individual projects, a lot of the time it starts about 5 years out. And then if there's any real key considerations around cultural heritage or planning implications that we kind of pick up in those early phases, will allow more time for that design process to take place. If it is something that is within an established area or site, then it kind of does kind of cut it down to a basic rule of thumb. We kind of do 3 years. So, you know, 1 year to make sure all the planning and those concepts are in place, and then, you know, a year to do good design, and then finally construct. And that's just, you know, all kind of moves around in that space.
Okay, next question is, how many interments is considered a small development?
I think
that's a really good question. Because, you know, we've just been doing a small memorial garden and started out as 50 CR positions over at Lilydale, and a really simple construction. The design's really simple. It didn't take us very long to do that. And but and so far so good. But smaller projects like that start out as simple ones and become very complex. So small can be thought of in terms of number of interments or ease of design and construction. But generally, they are more of the infill projects. So there might be a small patch of area and we figured there's an opportunity to put in 20, 30, 40 graves there, and we'll work to see if that can happen. But that's not to say it won't take a long time by the time, because we have to ask why is it empty, that piece of land? Why wasn't it built up before? So look, it varies, but yeah, generally under 100 graves, I'd say, is a small project for us.
Okay, last question on my list. Hamish, you mentioned applying relevance design standard. Are these standards particular to GMCT, or do they draw from the Australian standards, or both?
Yeah, look, a little bit of both. We've got civil engineering standards which we've developed ourselves, and that defines the type of concrete beam that we might be proposing, whether that's a lawn plaque or a monumental beam or a garden headstone beam. So we have a number of those that are all engineered, and they're that's what we use for our construction standards. But of course, we've got to follow Australian standards as well. So that might include DDA access requirements. It might be traffic requirements as well, hydrological ones as well. Look, land is subject to flooding, for example, so we've got to make sure that we're building within those parameters. But yeah, generally it's a combination of both.
Okay, thank you. I have one question for the three of you gentlemen. Are our trusts able to make contact with you if they've got any questions?
Certainly.
Thank you, Brenton.
I have a question. I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Look, just picking up first and foremost, fantastic presentation. I certainly learned a lot today. So thank you. And just picking up a point, Hamish, that you made about return on investment on product development. Is there a practice at GMCT where the customer-facing team, once the design is done and construction is started, where they start selling the products off the plan? So in other words, pre-needing, customers are pre-needing these products. And that I'm sure that'll go along when helping the business case as well.
Yes, look, I don't know if it influenced, Brent, you might know more about this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it influences the business case as much, but we've got pre-need and at-need, of course. And
one of the big things, because we do it more so with the mausolea build, and that's more so to respectfully turn the expression of interest list that we have to have in terms of the business case to say it's definitely worth building, into giving them the opportunity to kind of see and select. A lot of the time that is off the plan, but we can only take a deposit because the final price hasn't been gazetted yet. Okay. So it is possible, and there is allowances to be able to sell off the plan through all the guidelines and everything we have through the health department, as long as there's a gazetted fee to do so.
Thank you.
And there are now two more questions. Hamish, are you one of our cemetery trusts would love a visit from you?
Of course we can, yeah. More than happy to do that.
Okay, and then the last one is Lilydale has a magnificent vine memorial. Where was that sourced?
That's a great question.
A bit hard to ask Phil at the moment.
Is that the book with the two kind of pinky red granite blocks with the small vine leaf, the little plaque? Is that?
Graham, do you want to answer that question directly? Are you there? Yes, sorry, yes.
So I'm not sure whether the original supplier of the stone, because that's pre-GMCT, that was the Lilydale Cemeteries Trust, put that in. So even before I started on Lilydale 17 years ago, it was there when I started. But the actual leads that go on it are just through whether you use any of the bronze plaque suppliers. The stone itself and the design and what's kind of etched into it would have been undertaken by a stonemason.
Does that help you, Graham? Yes, thank you. Okay. Thank you so very, very much. I hope that everybody enjoyed the presentation. Yes, Dale, I can pass on your phone number. I hope everybody's enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't be frightened off. These guys are a resource that we can keep in touch with and ask questions if we need to as we go forward, or send them through to me and I will forward them on. And the presentation will be up on the website in a week or so. So thank you everybody for your time this morning. Thank you, Brenton. Thank you, Hamish. Thank you, Julian. Great presentation.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you very much.
Very much.